welcome today to Ask Epista series to discuss software as a medical device. We will go through today software as a medical device and MDR for the upcoming spring. If we think of software as a medical device in general, how would you define it and how would you characterize it? What could be the challenges there maybe when defining a software as a medical device?
A good question. I think what is very confusing for some is that it is two processes that are combined. We are talking about medical device and we are talking about software. And from a regulatory perspective, you would often see it as two different quality systems. But here the quality systems are combined. However, software as a medical device is a medical device and will be submitted as a medical device. So let's take a look at the definition of software as a medical device.
Absolutely.
So we have the EMA that defines software as a medical device, or they call it medical device software, that it is software that is intended to be used alone or in combination for a purpose as defined in the definition of medical device. Software must have a medical purpose on its own to be qualified as a software as a medical device. This definition I can find somewhat tricky. So I usually refer to the IMDRF, which is an organization that are worldwide, pro bono, describing software as a medical device and have made several guides when it comes to software as a medical device. And also FDA don't have their own definition, but they refer to this IMDRF definition. And it says software as a medical device is defined as software intended to be used for one or more medical purposes that perform these purposes without being part of the hardware medical device. So also very important is to have in mind that this is standalone. It is not embedded software.
And I bet that is a big challenge for many manufacturers to line it there.
Yeah. And again, it has to do with how you are submitting your product. You may also have a combination product where you have software as a medical device as part of a medical device. That could also be defined as a software as a medical device as a whole. There are different approaches. However, it is still the regulatory requirement that sets the definition and the approach of developing and validating and releasing, submitting these products. So we are still to follow the MDR and we are still to follow FDR Part 820.
Yes. And what if a manufacturer is asking, I bet they quite often ask, what could be the practical examples of software as a medical device? Do you have any case examples? What kind of solutions they could be?
Oh, yes. So examples might be software to process a patient image, for example, for diagnosing of skin cancer. It might be a treatment planning app that supplies information to a patient. An example there could be insulin, that you have the insulin pen and you have an app on your phone, and this together could provide information for the patient on how to take the insulin. Then we have algorithms. Algorithms in itself can be software as a medical device. And for example, for detection of atrial fibrillation, that is also a possibility.
All right, so concluding this, it's not always easy, and what you should really bear in mind when you're introducing software as a medical device, you should really ask yourself, what am I planning to use this for? What is the intended use of my product? How am I intending it to function and to interact in the domain? And what's the patient risk? What's the end user risk posed by that software as a medical device? And what kind of claims are you planning to take? How are you planning to fulfill the regulatory demands? How are you going to classify your product according to the rules 9, 10, and 11? If we look at the MDR rules 9, 10, and 11 for active devices, rule number 9 is concerning of the active therapeutic devices that are intended to use or exchange energy. The devices regulated and classified under Rule 10 is for the active devices used for diagnosis that may or may not supply energy for imaging purposes. So as you mentioned previously, the X-rays and other imaging methods like MRIs and stuff like that. Rule 11 is used for classifying active devices that are used to administer, remove medicines and other substances to or from the human body. And I think this rule is the one that is the most challenging one. The rule 12 there is then used for all the remaining other active devices. But correct me if I'm wrong, Hannah, this rule number 11 is really the most complex one and that has the biggest impact on the product classification. Am I right, Hannah?
You are absolutely correct. And when we are talking software as a medical device, it is primary Rule 11 that are in use. These MDR rules, they were changed quite a bit with the new MDR because medical device in the past, we had about 80% of medical devices that were group or class 1, and the last 20% were categorized in 2 or more. With the MDR, it was changed around so that 80% were classified as 2 or more and only 20% as class 1. So that is also why we have the new rule 12 for all other active devices. It is new. But take a look at rule number 11 again, because again, software as a medical device will mainly fall into under this rule, and it has the final saying in what classification that our product it has. So maybe we should go a little in details with the impact on Rule 11.
I think that's a brilliant idea. And if we look at the definition in the MDR for the medical device, it actually says any instrument, apparatus, software.
Indeed.
And then used for diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, treatment, or alleviation of disease, or diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, alleviation, or compensation for an injury or disability. So concluding this, as you mentioned, vast majority will actually fall underneath this.
You're correct. And when we look on these definitions of impact of Rule 11, we need to have in mind that most of standalone software, it will still be classified as a class 1. However, if you have combination product, if you have the software in combination with another device, for example, then you need to look into details with the impact of the Rule 11.
And there again, we go back to the intended use. If we look quickly to the classification changes that were introduced by MDR and Rule 11, it was a bit of a surprise to me to realize that under MDD, there was an application that was supporting the selection and the dosing calculation of cytostatic drugs that could or was previously classified as MDD class 1 device, and now naturally, of course, it will go further with the MDR to be class 3 product. So there could be some surprises ahead for the manufacturers looking through this, and if the grandfathering is no longer possibility as it is with the current regulation, that will probably be a bit of a challenge for manufacturers.
It will, because many of these products are to be reclassified because we don't have grandfathering anymore, and we have been more experienced in assessing the intended use and the hazard, the risk to the patient. So, and this is what we wanted with the new regulation, that we are more on top of what is critical to the patient.
Yes, and especially there could be a potential risk for the class 3 devices to be overqualified, because they might have a risk of irreversible damage or even death, but it could be that the likelihood of the risk is very small, but because it's recognized as a risk, it might automatically become class 3 device, and then it has to be qualified accordingly. And to have as a kind of a key takeaway, in case the software is no longer belonging into class 1, then I think it would be crucial to consider your quality management system, the robustness of it, consider your notified body role very carefully and assign one as soon as possible. Assess the risk from the patient perspective, not from the software as a medical device perspective, but for the end user perspective.
Indeed.
And then bear in mind these very unique challenges that there might be what comes to software as a medical device. If we think about the submissions and the notified body role, what's your intake on that?
Well, the notified body, these are the people who has the final take on the classification. So based on your definition of intended use, you can, of course, get input from notified body on the classification that you feel is suited for your product. But you can have the best intention, you can have the best description of intended use. It is still notified body who will set the classification for the product. And that has to do with the submission of the product. Again, look on other products that have been submitted, compare and see how similar are my product to another product. What is the intended use? What is the risk to the patient? How have notified body classified this product, and how has it been submitted? Because the classification also have impact for the submission of the product. We have a pre-submission, a pre-market approval, which most class 3 products will fall into. And then we have for class 1 and class 2, we have for the FDA, the 510K to be submitted for regulatory authorities. Then we should also look on de novo, new products, new devices. There are also different approvals on these kind of products. And finally, we're looking on HDE, humanitarian device exception. If it has great benefit for humans, you will have a faster track to have the product on market.
The HRD is also risk-based assessed.
Yeah.
So it has to, the risks has to be remarkably lesser than the potential benefit, and that would probably give the exemption.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So you still have the risk-based approach to your classification of the product. So it is still as safe, even though it may go a bit faster. This was for FDA. For EU, we have a presumption of conformity that needs to be in place according to the MDR, Article 8 and 9. We have Annex 2, Section 4, about the control documents to be submitted for authorities. We have Annex 2 and 3 on technical documentation that needs to be ready when submitting to market. And again, depending on the classification specific rules.
Yeah, it's not easy to be a manufacturer juggling in this regulatory jungle. If we think of where do I go from here with my product, I think the key question would be to solve, could it be class 1? And probably it will not be a class 1 product if the pyramid has been changed upside down. I think what would be very important for the manufacturers to start early and get your quality management system certified and approved pronto, very quickly. Also involving the notified body early in the process, do a good pre-study, search for the existing products, and remembering what you just said, that the approval route and the submission fully depends on the product risk and the classification information. So it's a sum of 3 different factors. And for the small and medium-sized businesses, it would be very crucial and important to get the classification right from the beginning, so that you would be able to get your product to the market with no additional delays. And it could be that for some of the small, medium-sized businesses, might not be the regulatory tasks are not the key competence. So I think maybe it would be a good idea to outsource some of these activities, like setting up quality management system and getting it certified, and assess your products, conduct risk assessments, and so on. And another thing that I find very crucial for the small, medium-sized businesses is that if they do not have the competence in-house, they should still ensure that they do have this person responsible of regulatory compliance at their disposal at all times. And what is your intake, Hanne? Is that always very easy to ensure the availability for a person like that?
Oh no, absolutely not. And not with the new regulation coming up. It will be a bottleneck that you have access to the right resources at the right time. So, as you say, start early, assess your product portfolio, what kinds of products would you like to submit to the market, your strategy, and based on that, clarify what classifications that you mean that these products will fall into, and the expertise and the competences of this qualified person. What should that be to be the right person to with the competences to have the product on the market. So again, new regulation and therefore new requirements to add in. It will be a bottleneck, absolutely.
All right, Hannah, it's always such a pleasure to have a little conversation with you about the regulatory challenges. So thanks a lot, Hannah. Thanks.
Thank you.